The list and the power is not in the walls. And living with purpose of the majesty of
Thank you, Lord, for your grace and for your mercy. We thank you, Lord, for giving us power in your name, on the name that saves. We thank you for the authority, oh God, that we have in your name, Jesus Christ. Lord, we ask you, God, to bless us on this day. Give us strength, oh God. Bless this vessel, oh God, to deliver your word. Open up ears to receive your word on today. Enlighten us, oh God. Give us revelation, give us understanding. Let this word impact our lives. Let it be a call to action even on today. We thank you for what you've done, what you're going to do. Lord, we pray, oh God, that the saints are edified, that the sinners are saved. We pray in Jesus' name. Everybody say amen. 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 We him by baptism into death, that like as Christ was raised up from the dead by the glory of the Father, even so we also should walk in the newness of life. Let's read it one more time. Therefore, we are buried with him by baptism into death, that like as Christ was raised up from the dead by the glory of the Father, even so we also should walk in the newness of life. For a subject today, I just want to talk on the thought, living the good life. Living the good life. You may be seated. God bless you, man, not to leap off a bridge some 300 and something feet above a busy highway. And the young man was convinced that the only answer to his problems was suicide. So the minister used all his persuasiveness, and finally the young man stepped off the ledge to safety. And much to the minister's surprise, the following Sunday he sees the young man sitting in the back pew of the church. The young man approaches the minister and he says, in my darkest hour, he said, I noticed there was something different about you when you were talking to me on that ledge. He said, I noticed that you were saying things that was from the heart. He said, your words, I could just tell, were a reflection of the life that you live. Yes. And he said, I came today to this church to find out how I can live this good life like you're living it. And so the minister pulls the young man aside and explains to him that Jesus died for his sins, and that he also can have life and that more abundantly. Yes. And so my question is, what if you had been the minister in that place? If you would have been in his place, what would you have said to try to persuade the young man not to take a fatal plunge some 300 feet to the ground? Your ability to answer the question is somewhat important because you may one day be called upon to persuade someone to come down from the ledge of destruction. The ledge may not be 300 feet or so above a highway, but it may be more of the ledge of an emotional breakdown. You may be called upon to talk someone down from, talk them out of immorality or from a spiritual catastrophe. But what if your ability to talk them off the ledge was based on your life that you live? Would they see a life apart from God when they see you? Or would they see someone that's living a fruitful life for Jesus Christ? Amen. And so today, as this is the last Sunday of 2015, last Sunday of the year, my hope is as we prepare to go into a new year, that this message will be a wake-up call to those who have been struggling to serve God. Those that have been struggling to obey God, struggling with distractions, struggling with the distraction of finances and people and places. And I also want to encourage those that have been faithful to continue to live the good life. So the good life is not a life apart from God. That's not the good life. That's what the devil wants us to think. Wants us to think that the good life is outside of God. Amen. But sin separates us from God. So we have to understand that Jesus died for the sins of the world. Amen. Amen. So what we really think is a good life is a life that's leading us somewhere we really don't want to go. So I've got to understand that the good life isn't pop over praise. Amen. It's not wine over worship. Amen. It's not fornication over sanctification. That's not the good life. Amen. The flesh would desire those foreign things. Amen. But yet those are the very things that God has delivered us from.
Yes.
Amen. I'm just going to talk today. Amen. So if you're living, going to live the good life, you can't stay connected with the people or the things that had you bound. Amen. I was a pothead. I was hanging out with other potheads, and they had me bound. Amen. But Jesus set me free from it. Amen. If I was an alcoholic, amen, and I was hanging with alcoholics, then I was bound being around them alcoholics. Amen. But I understand now that Jesus set me free. Amen. That's what Paul was trying to relate to the church in Galatians. He said, stand fast, therefore, in the liberty wherewith Christ has made us free. Amen. He said, and be not, he says, entangled again with the yoke of bondage. What are you saying there, Pastor? In other words, Paul says, once you've been released from sin, he says, stand fast in your freedom. Amen. In other words, once you get out of prison, don't go back. Amen. Stand fast in your freedom. Stand fast in your release, amen, from sin itself. And don't get entangled again with the yoke of bondage. Amen. You know, there's some things in life you only got to experience one time. And you learn that lesson. You understand. I will not go down that road again. I will not bump my head over that again. Amen. But we got to understand. Don't get entangled again with the yoke of bondage. Because you can't live in sin and live the good life. And I believe that's what some of our minds have trickled into today, man. We want to live in sin, but we also want to have a relationship with God. Amen. Well, I can do this, Pastor, because God knows my heart, and so I can still dibble and dabble here and still live the good life. Amen. But Paul says, he says, walk in the Spirit. He says, and you shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh. For the flesh, he says, lust against the Spirit, and the Spirit against the flesh. And he says, these are contrary one to the other, so you cannot do the things that you would. So if you're walking in the Spirit, then you're living the good life. Amen. And that's what I'm trying to live every day. I'm not trying to just experience it for a season. I'm living in the good life. Amen. Jesus didn't set this thing up for us just so it's a temporary situation. It's not just a temporary living situation, but we can live this good life until we get the glory. Amen. So if you're fulfilling the lust of the flesh, church, you're not, amen, you got some work to do. Amen. If you're fulfilling the work of the flesh, you got some work to do to get to live the good life. Amen. So the good life is a life that has experienced separation. Amen. It's a life that has experienced being apart or set apart. And Paul says in Romans 6, he says, God forbid, how shall we that are dead to sin live, he says, any longer in it, amen, or therein. And so if I'm dead to something, I shouldn't be living in a dead thing. Amen. So death to sin is separation of the believer from the dominating power of sin. And that's what sin is. It's a dominating force in our lives. Amen. It was so powerful that only Jesus could do something with it. Sin was so strong in our lives that only Jesus, amen, had the power and the authority to put it in its place. Amen. Only his blood was pure enough, amen, to purchase, amen, us from the penalty of sin and death. Amen. And so we understand today, you ought to thank God that you're free. That dominating hand that had you, that dominating force that was holding you back, amen, has been released from your life from the moment you became a born-again Christian. Amen. And so like a free person, you have a right to live the good life. Amen. I'm enjoying the good life. Amen. Some of us, amen, we got to understand that the life, to live the good life is a life of commitment. Amen. You got to be committed to it. Amen. You know, it's something of my years of pastoring, but we find that some folk, amen, were more committed to sin as sinners as they are to God as saints. Amen. You sit around and you talk to folks, amen. You find out what they used to do before they met Jesus. Find out how they used to be. Oh yeah, I used to sell this and move that. Amen. And I was on my post 24/7 on the streets moving this and that. And you don't never get saved, you never see him in church. I said, how can a person be more committed to the sin they were in as a sinner than to the God that saved them as a saint? So I believe, amen, some folk have some work to do, amen. Everybody, amen, has to step it up just a notch, amen, so that we can make sure we're living the good life. Amen. We're committed, some folk, to partying every weekend, amen, as sinners, but can't commit to get to church consistently as a saint. I don't understand that. I have to scratch my head sometimes because when I think of the goodness of Jesus and all he's done for me, amen, I can't understand, amen, why I struggle with church as a saint, but I was cool with sin as a sinner. I struggle now, amen. I can't get there because I got a little headache. I can't get there, amen, because I got this and that going on. I can't get there because I got to do this and that. But we was at the club every weekend. We were hooking up with hookups, amen, during the week. Amen. We can't get the prayer during the week. Can't get the Bible class, amen, because we're struggling to get to the good life. Amen. And so living the good life, church, requires an understanding of the mechanics of the Christian life. Got to understand there's some things you have to do, amen, mechanically, as I call it here. Another word, so live the good life, amen. And this is what Paul is speaking of in our text today. We understand what a Christian life is, how it came about, amen, and how it operates, amen. You got to understand these things so you can live it. Amen. How do you understand the mechanics of, amen, of the Christian life? How do I come to understand what this new life is about and how it even came to be a part of me? How it operates, amen. You got to get taught. Amen. You got to be taught the word of God. You have to be in attendance, amen. You have to be amongst the saints. Amen. You have to pray your own self, amen. You got to study to show yourself approved, amen. But when you refrain from those things, you fail to learn, amen, the mechanics of a Christian life. Amen. We understand when you live in the good life, you have an identification with Jesus Christ. Amen. Paul says in Romans 6, he says, for if we have been planted together in the likeness of his death, he says, we shall be also in the likeness of his resurrection. Amen. So likeness speaks of your identification with Jesus Christ. You have an identification with both his death and his burial and his resurrection. Amen. Some of you all, you got to understand, if you're born again, your spiritual DNA, amen, reveals that God is your daddy. Amen. We don't have to go on borrowing and find out who your daddy is. Amen. But when you live in a good life, your DNA reeks of your daddy. Amen. Holiness is spilled off for you. Amen. Prayer, amen, exudes from you. Amen. Your anointing, amen, just shows up when you step through the door. Amen. Because of the DNA that's inside of you spiritually. You're identified with a winner when you're identified with Jesus Christ. Identified with a prince. Amen. When you're identified with Jesus Christ, you identify with a king, with a conqueror. Amen. I'm getting happy. I'm preaching to myself today. Amen. As a matter of fact, you don't even have to announce your presence when you identify with Jesus. Demons have to understand who you are. Amen. When you step into a room. Amen. Because you're identified with Jesus Christ. People will know there's something special about you. It's time to start living the good life. Somebody say glory. Trying to live the good life, amen. I've got to, amen, understand who my daddy is. Amen, understand where I'm going, amen, because the Bible says in my Father's house are many mansions. Amen, so I understand my daddy's making provisions for me. Amen, and while I'm living the good life, things are still happening for me in the spiritual world. Amen, while I'm living the good life. So I've got to understand living the good life means I've received some sort of implantation. Amen, implanted within you is a new nature, a new creature when you become born again of the water and of the spirit. You see, your old nature is no good anymore. Amen. Your old you, amen, will keep you old and keep you apart from God. Amen. But Paul tells us in our very text today, he says, therefore, we're buried with him by baptism into death. Amen. That like as Christ was raised up from the dead by the glory of the Father, even so we also should walk in the newness of life. Amen. So this baptism is a spiritual baptism here. Amen. It goes on in the spiritual realm. Once you're born again, you receive, amen, an implantation. You get a new heart. Amen. Because our heart, amen, was cold. Amen. Our heart of sin was hard. Amen. And so in the natural, if you think about it, there are times where a heart transplant transplant is requested, it's required, amen. As a matter of fact, some folks, if they don't get the heart transplant, they'll die, amen. But however, the body sometimes, and the organs in the body, sometimes it rejects, amen, the transplanted heart. You've ever seen that, amen, where they thought the heart would be a good fit or match, amen, but the body and the organs would reject the heart transplant, amen. But I'm here to tell you today that when God gives you a new heart, amen, the body, amen, now has to submit to the new heart. It rejects the old body because the heart is now in control. Somebody ought to shout hallelujah. Amen. Paul lets us know, says in Romans 6, amen. He says, knowing this, that our old man is crucified with him. Amen. So therefore my old nature is crucified with Christ. And now my new heart, amen, can operate in my life. He said that the body of sin might be destroyed. And that's what we all want. We want our fleshly nature, amen, to be destroyed. We want the sinful us to be destroyed, amen. And so you got to understand, you've not only been given an implanted heart, amen, but you also have it implanted with new power. Hallelujah. Are you glad today for the power of the Holy Ghost? My God, living a good life with Jesus, amen, gives you both a desire and a power to do God's will. Before we was working for the devil, working, amen, for our own sake, amen, we were out serving him and doing his bidding, doing things that were displeasing to God, amen. The power that we use, amen, it was to tear down God's kingdom. The power that we possess, amen, we didn't use it for good, we used it for evil. My God, but when you, amen, were implanted with a new power, God implanted you, amen, with a new heart, amen, we find out now in Philippians 2, Paul lets the church know, he says, for it is God which working in you, he says, both to will and to do his good pleasure. So you got to understand, it's not about you, it's all about doing God's business. It's about pleasing him, it's about his good pleasure. And so the question every day, when you wake up out of bed and wipe the crust from your eye, when you go into the bathroom and wipe the slob off the side of your lips, should not be what I want to do today. The question should be, God, what can I do to please you today? What's the assignment? What are you asking or requiring of me today? My God, we should wear ourselves like a loose garb, where our lives should be like a loose garb unto God, so that whatever he's asking of you, amen, you can say, here it is. He says, I need you to sow a seed today. Here it is, God. He says, I need you to we give your services up to the homeless today. There should be no problem. You may say, go and serve somebody today. Shouldn't be a problem, because you understand, for it's God which works in you. No, you'll never be able to do it on your own or under your own strength. It's God that will work in you. God will give you a task. He'll give you an assignment. If you think you can't do it, then it's God which is working in you. Look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, it's the God in you that wants to serve somebody. Shout glory. Shout glory one more time. And so you do of his good will. You're living a good life. That's how you know you're doing things right. When you're living a good life, you're doing the things which please God. That's why Jesus said, I always do the things which please my Father. Jesus was living a good life. He was living day by day, walking by faith and not by sight. That's living a good life. Not going where he lays hands. That's living a good life, because he lived a life of faith. And so now we've got to understand, he wants us to live the same life he lived. The good life. The good life isn't walking around with a fat pocket. The good life isn't driving the most expensive cars. The good life is not living in a mansion on the hill. Amen. Now God gives you those things, so be it. But the good life is doing those things which pleases God. And so now I understand, I've got his attention. I've got his pleasure. When I do what he asks me to do. When I'm on my post. When I'm where I'm supposed to be. When I'm doing what I'm supposed to be. My God, I'm living the good life. Sometimes you have ups and downs. when you're living the good life, won't always work out the way you planned it to, but just keep on, keep it on. Oh my God, help is on the way. Just keep on living the good life. The good life is the right life. It's making the right decisions. It's making the right choices. It's making your mind up that Jesus is mine. That's living the good life. It's eschewing evil. It's staying away from sin. That's living the good life. And so now I gotta wrap this up. There's benefits of living the good life. Oh yeah, God won't leave you without benefits. He'll leave you like the government will. He'll leave you like a spouse will. But when you serve God, when you're living a good life, there's some divine benefits that come with service. First of all, you get to walk in the newness of life. My God, that's a God promise. My God, you get a new spirit when you walk in the newness of life. When you're living a good life, you get a new heart. He takes out a heart of stone, gives you a heart of flesh. Without making one cut, you won't see it cut on the outside, but I'll be renewed on the inside. Why? It's the benefit of living a good life. You get new grace when you live your good life. You get a start over. You get a reset button. I may have messed up before, but God gave me a second chance. He let me start over, but I didn't do it right the first time. I got new life. I got power to overcome because I'm living the good life. Give your neighbor a high five and say, I got power. Living a good life. Power over the devil. Power over myself. Power to call things that be mine. That's all they were. I'm living a good life. Keep everything in perspective. Everything you need when you're living a good life. Jesus and I provide it. I'll sustain you when you're living a good life. I'll take care of your needs when you're living a good life. This is the last Sunday of 2015. Make your mind up. As I go into a new year, I'm going to live a good life. I'm going to walk out of the old into the new. Living a good life. I can do it. I know I can make it. With God, all things are possible. Make your mind up. For the Bible says, when we were yet without strength, for in due time, Christ died for the ungodly. When you couldn't help yourself, when you were without strength, without hope, when you were bound for hell, Christ died so we can live a good life. Thank God today. He didn't leave you where you were. Thank God today. He didn't throw you to the dogs. Thank God today. He didn't give up on you. He's letting you live a good life. Gave you a second chance. Gave you another turn. Gave you a redo. Said live again. You shall not die, but live. Live a good life. Somebody shout good. Live a good life. Don't mind me, I'm just living a good life. When you see me shout because I'm happy, don't mind me. I'm just living a good life. You see me walking around broke and I'm still smiling, don't mind me. I'm just living a good life. Hallelujah. Because I decided when I'm living a good life, I'm not going to let nobody steal my joy. I've been through too much to give up now. I've been to hell and back too many times to let this go. I've seen the word. I know about it. I know too much about it. I'm going to keep on. I'll keep on living a good life. Keep on living the good life. I made my mind up. I'm going to die living a good life. I'm just going to coast on out here with a good life. I'm just going to live this good life until Jesus says it's time to go.
Yes, God.
Is it a walk in the park? No. Do you have your mountains and your valleys? Yes. But keep on living a good life. The Bible says they that endure to the end, the same shall be saved. So you have to endure the good life. The challenges that come with it. Everything that comes along with the package, you got to go through it. The first roadblock, you can't throw in the towel. Say it's over. The first bad thought, amen. The first wrong idea, the first slip and fall, you can't say I'm through. You got to get up and keep on walking. Keep on living a good life. I'm through. I wonder if there's someone.